As I enter the year of our Lord 2021, I'd like to capitalize on the yearly retrospection craze that seems to boost my view and subscriber counts. I'd like to take a look back at the past year of collecting. 2020 was probably my biggest year as far as the growth of my collection is concerned, as over 1 in every 6 figures in my current collection was acquired this year. Yeah, maybe it's time for a downsize and refocus. It was also a really great year for my channel. By the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, I had made 52 reviews and gained just shy of 300 subscribers this year alone. Since I suspect you in the audience probably don't care about that, let's just get into my top 20 Transformers of 2020. Before we begin, there are only a few rules, which will be very familiar to you if you've seen anyone else's list this season. First, this is a list of figures I've bought in 2020, not a list of the best figures released that year. Second, this list isn't necessarily a list of the best figures I've gotten this year, it's more of the 20 most interesting or entertaining. There are a couple molds on this list that some would consider stinkers, but I still find them enjoyable all the same. Lastly, I'm including third-party figures since I only have one figure that even qualifies, and he's definitely worth talking about. With that out of the way, let's begin. Number 20. Universe Overkill. The Classics Grimlock mold has always been something of a curiosity to me, but I never sought after the figure since I never felt the need to get yet another Grimlock. Luckily for me, all they had to do to pique my interest was paint it in the colors of an obscure Decepticon. This mold features one of the most out-there transformation schemes for a Grimlock alike, though the robot mode suffers quite a bit by the lack of locking tabs. Number 19. Cybertron Override. Everyone who's been following this channel knows that Cybertron has always been my baby. One of my favorite robot designs from the show was Override, the speed queen of Velocitron. This figure features my absolute favorite alternate mode of any Transformers figure ever, and it makes up a lot for the rest of this figure. The transformation is a cleverly designed automorph that fits with Override's character, but the robot mode is kind of a clunky, back-heavy mess. Still, I think she's good enough to belong on this list. Number 18. Robots in Disguise Sideburns Supercharge Mode. I actually bought all 3 Autobot triplets at once, albeit in their supercharged decos, and I have to say I'm impressed with a lot of them. Stunning vehicle modes, complex and fun transformations, and pristine clear plastic and rubber tires on my copies make me a very happy customer. The only reason X-Brawn isn't on this list is due to his side heaviness. Number 17. Cybertron Overhaul. The Cybertron Scout class range of figures was an absolutely impeccable lineup, and Overhaul proved that on day one. This Brawn homage turns into a chunky and substantial off-road truck and features a wonderfully simple but satisfying transformation. What he lacks in articulation, he makes up for with his sheer fun factor. I only had the brush guard repaint as a kid, but I'm glad I went back and picked this figure up, and I recommend you do as well. Number 16. Cybertron Hardtop. Hey look, another Cybertron Scout! This figure was generously given to me by my good friend ID Armed, and it did not disappoint. I'm pretty much absolutely in love with everything about Hardtop, from his colors to his dynamic transformation to his kinda doofy looking robot mode. He also has the added benefit of being a random Decepticon crowd filler. You can't go wrong with one of those. Number 15. Studio Series Constructicon Scrapper. I guess I had to pick a figure that actually came out in 2020 sooner or later. My thoughts on Scrapper have been pretty thoroughly explained in my review of him featuring my friend Arkham Knight Rider, so I guess go watch that if you want the full picture. If you're confused as to why Devastator isn't on this list, it's because I bought all his components separately over the course of 2 years, so it wouldn't really be fair to put it on this list. It'd be different if I had bought the box set, though. Number 14. Movie Dropkick. Dropkick was my first foray into the original 2007 movie line in quite a long time. I never really had too many figures from that line, as my collection didn't really start growing until the days of Revenge of the Fallen, so there were quite a few gaps in my collection I've been wanting to fill, and Dropkick was one of them. I gotta say, this figure is just pure Kino. He's got this dumbass truck mode with a giant Decepticon symbol adorning the hood, and his robot mode has kibbles sprouting up like weeds, but Dropkick just seems to make it all work in his favor. Number 13. Generations Durge. I've actually gotten 4 different versions of the classic Seeker mold this year, though I feel Durge is the only one to warrant getting put on this list. And the reason I put Durge on this list is, well, I just like Durge. The Seeker mold is the tactile equivalent of comfort food in my opinion, and no one lives up to that description quite like Durge, with his delicious candy blue plastic and unique wing design. I just think he's neat. Number 12. Classics Rodimus. This figure seems to get a really bad rap, and I'm not sure why. Obviously, he doesn't live up to modern standards of articulation and engineering, but what he does excel at is build quality, fun, and pure drop-dead sexiness. Rodimus' vehicle mode is definitely up there as one of my favorites in all of Transformers, as it's so sleek and smooth and sharp. I just love everything about this thing. The transformation is a little clunky, but still has that mid-2000s Cybertron charm, and the robot mode isn't half bad either. As time goes on, I think this figure gets more and more underrated. Number 11. Alternators Smokescreen. Here's another figure that made the list for just being so damn interesting. I've been wanting to explore the Alternators line for ages, and my introduction to said toy line, that being Sideswipe, was underwhelming to say the least. Luckily for me, Smokescreen was far better. First off, I'm a sucker for racing liveries, and Smokescreen has one that is to die for. This figure is also a great demonstration of the toy line's attention to detail, both interior and exterior. The transformation and robot mode are extremely chunky and haven't aged well whatsoever, but I feel that it's cool to see how the designers were able to make a functional, articulated robot mode out of what is ostensibly a model car, one which even has working legs. Take that, Sideswipe. Number 10. Power the Prime's Dinobot Swoop. Now, I don't think this would have made anyone's top 10 even in the year of his release, but I feel that Power the Prime's Swoop is one of the most absolutely comfy figures in my entire collection. The Pterosaur mode is a satisfying chunky block of tech, and the transformation is engaging. The robot mode is lean and lithe, a step away from the other Dinobots, making him stand out more. He's the only Power the Prime's Dinobot I can wholeheartedly recommend, and he's made it within my top 10 purchases of the year. Number 9. PowerCore Combiners Smolder and Chopster. It seems that ever since their inception, the PowerCore Combiners have been something of a forbidden fruit to most collectors, and as we all know, the forbidden fruit is always the tastiest. For starters, a Decepticon fire truck is a really good idea that should definitely be used more often. The robot mode is extremely interesting, with alien proportions and a defined silhouette. Coupled with his Minicom partner Chopster, Smolder is one of the most interesting offerings from this line. Number 8. Select's Hotshot. Anyone who's seen my Siege Galaxy Upgrade Optimus Prime review knows that I wasn't too keen on the figure, but was aching for more Cybertron updates like any upstanding member of society would. Luckily, Hotshot scratched that itch far better than Optimus did, and he didn't even need to retool anything other than the head. Of course, judging from Hound's packaging art, the mold was always intended to be Hotshot, so it naturally worked for him, breathing yet more new life into the character, harkening back to the glory days while still trudging ever forward, just how I like it. Number 7. Robots in Disguise Prowl Supercharge Mode. Prowl is probably the least weird, or I should say most well-balanced, of the RID-01 Autobot triplets. His transformation is more or less symmetrical, intuitive, and fun. His robot mode is striking in its design and proportions, looking more like a robotic Ronin than a stereotypical Autobot. What pushes Prowl over the top for me is that luscious metallic blue paint job, flecked with enough metal to make him shine. Overall, I'm extremely happy with the triplets, but if I had to choose only one to be my favorite, it would be Prowl. Number 6. Studio Series OffRoad Bumblebee. This is another figure I've already reviewed, and if you've seen that video, you'll know that I absolutely adore OffRoad Bumblebee, and I maintain that this figure is the best in the entire line thus far. Both his vehicle and robot modes are clean as can be, with only minimal kibble between them, and the transformation is cleverly designed. He may be small, but what he lacks in stature he definitely makes up for in quality. It's just a shame the mold wasn't reused for anything worthwhile. Number 5. Energon Divebomb. My love of Unicron Trilogy Scouts knows no bounds, which is why Divebomb here is so high up on the list. That, and he turns into a bird. Birds are like the easiest way to get me to like something. Nevertheless, Divebomb is a great figure on his own merits, with an absolutely wild transformation for this era in engineering. Having the legs transform into the wings always struck me as clever, even growing up, and it's always very satisfying to see those trans-green feathers unfurl themselves going into bird mode. Number 4. Mastermind Creations Nightmorph Airborne Squadron Screecher. Here we have the only third-party entry on this list, and it's also the only third-party figure I've gotten this year. I admire the steampunk Hearts of Steel aesthetic. It's not exactly original, but for Transformers it's pretty different, and I love the Chiropteranic aura of the Seekers. Mastermind Creations Screecher hits all of those design elements to a T, and the Flying Machine alternate mode is extremely interesting. Just be sure to handle this figure with care, it's pretty sharp. Number 3. Masterpiece MPM5 Barricade. Barricade was my first foray into the Masterpiece movie series, and what a foray it was. Some things I weren't expecting from this figure were its size, the insane level of engineering to make it screen accurate, and the die-cast metal used to increase stability. I have to say I'm very impressed with the figure, and it made for a great first impression for the line. As of right now, the only other figure I have is Ratchet, so Barricade definitely earns his spot on the list. Number 2. Generation 1 Blaster. This is probably the closest thing I had to a sleeper hit on the list. I've been keeping up with the vintage G1 line of reissues for the past few years, although I missed out on Devastator, and it's been fun collecting a bunch of molds I'd otherwise never have experienced. There's something about Blaster's graceful simplicity that makes him so engaging to just pick up and mess with that really stood out to me. Nothing about the transformation is creaky like on Soundwave, and the stickers were nowhere near as frustrating as on Astro Train. In fact, they were pre-applied, and damn well for such a thing, I might add. If you picked up a Blaster right now, I guarantee that you'll have a good time with it, no matter what. Number 1. Cybertron Defense Scattershot. Could it have been anything else? The upgrade to the figure which started this channel in the first place, Cybertron Defense Scattershot is one of my all-time favorite Unicron trilogy figures, featuring everything that makes that era of Transformers special. The figure itself is massive and weighty. The gimmicks are extremely fun and dynamic, and the best part is that this figure was so well designed so that said gimmicks don't affect the articulation whatsoever. As far as the year 2005 goes, this is a marvel of engineering and definitely deserves the top spot on this list. And that's a wrap on the 2020 chapter of my collection. Major apologies for not getting this out sooner. Burnout is a very real thing, as many of you may know, but from here on out, reviews should be back as good as ever. As of writing this outro, I'm currently at 500 subscribers, so I'd like to thank everyone who's been supporting me these past couple years. I hope everyone has a happy new year. You know, assuming 2021 won't be even worse, as it's already shaping up to be. With all that said, this has been Kit Katastrophe. Transform and roll out.